All right, well, welcome everyone to the I2V2 tranSMART Foundation's community meeting for February 2021. This is Rudy Potenzo, and I'll be the host today. Diane Keogh sends her regards, but she's in another meeting that she's trying to get out of, and hopefully will join us shortly. But we will press ahead. Just wanted to mention that we have our upcoming meetings, a couple of topics that we've already identified for the next two community meetings in March. The 4C will give us an update on where the project is and how things are going. And in April, ACT will give us an update on where things stand there. I wanted to mention that these community meetings, we try to bring topics of interest here every month. It's the third, as you know, the third Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And we're always looking for topics. And so please let us know, either contact me or Diane. We'd love to schedule you in for a session if you have something that you'd like to talk about. One note, the user interface working group is meeting. Their meeting is on the third Wednesday of the month at noon Eastern time. And their next meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. And the agenda tomorrow will be to talk about the Leaf UI. And also we'll get a presentation from Anupama on the new ACT UI. So please join. There's a note there in the Zoom. There's also information on the website. And when we post the slide deck and this recording in the next day or so from this meeting, we'll also be able to have those links for you. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the 4C Consortium has published their first newsletter. I think the goal here is to have a newsletter on a regular basis and with information on how the consortium is going. Right now, there are 342 hospitals participating across 8 countries. And we think that there's a lot of interesting activities going on there. Again, we'll have a session on that at the next month's community meeting, but you should have received this newsletter and as part of our regular foundation mailing. If not, please let us know and we'll get you on that mailing list. So here's the topics that we're going to cover today. We're going to go through a number of these things fairly quickly. And then our guest speaker today is Keith Elliston, who's going to talk about his new endeavor, PHEMI systems. We'll get to that in a minute. It's not too soon to start thinking about our Boston Symposium. So planning is starting now. Yes, again, it's going to be a virtual meeting, we think. It's just the chances of getting anything put together in a live session in September are, I think, we're still going to be very difficult. So we're going to then shoot for live session. The dates are June 22nd and 23rd. We still call it our Boston Symposium, but it will be completely virtual. We are looking for keynote speakers and session topics. Some of the ones that we've been thinking about are, first of all, certainly talking to some of the COVID activities that the foundation has been involved with and giving updates on the different things that have been happening. We are also thinking about a panel discussion on things that should be easy but are not, and start to think about, some of the aspects of using our various tools. But one of the, some of the areas that have been coming particularly of interest is in identifying patient cohorts, for example, is how, for example, we're encoding things like race, diversity, death, severity in our different data sets, and how we might be able to start trying to understand how to better encode these to make them the data sets more usable across different systems. And so that we think that should be an interesting conversation. The future of fire in clinical research, also another topic that we think could be of interesting. We're always looking for what we'll call hidden pearls, use cases that people are using I2V2 and tranSMART for that would be interesting to share to the community. And also leveraging tranSMART as we get our integration improved and expanding between I2V2 and tranSMART. We think that's going to open up the tranSMART platform for additional use, and so starting to think about how we can leverage that for different types of research projects as we move ahead. So these are just some of the topics we're thinking about, and we will be starting to assemble ideas. If you have interest, want to help us put together the agenda, please contact again either myself or Diane. The European Users Group continues to meet. They meet on the first Tuesday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and the discussions have a lot of discussion at this group has been around tranSMART and integration with I2B2, but also other needs for the European community. So if you're interested, please come. These sessions have been very active and lots of interesting discussions. So if you have interest there, if you're in Europe and want to talk about using I2B2 or tranSMART, please feel free to come to the session. We've also started a tranSMART working group. We've had one session so far. This is meeting on the 4th Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern. All this stuff is on the website as well. But this is really intended to be a drop-in session for people who are using the system. If you have questions, need some help with a particular feature, or not sure how, if something is working, or implementation questions, data loading questions, whatever, maybe even talk about some new features. We had a session, as I said, at the end of January, and we had a couple of people showed and had some good discussions. So please, this is purely drop in. We're not going to have a fixed agenda. This is really to talk, for you to come and talk to us about your use of tranSMART and suggestions, comments, other things that might be of interest. Please join us if you use tranSMART. The last general kind of topic is that we are once again doing a survey of people using Foundation software, I2B2 and tranSMART, as open source and available, on GitHub, and generally people download the tools, they implement it, they use it in different places. We really don't have a lot of knowledge, and unless you publish a paper about specifically who's using the system and maybe how you're using it, for us to be able to at least stay in touch and try to find out what sorts of things are interesting and useful to you. So we've put this survey together. You should have all actually received an invitation to participate. We've not had a lot of participation so far. Please come and just answer the questions quickly. It's not, I don't think it should take very long, a few minutes to go through the form. The link is there. Again, it's on the website, and you can find it. The questions are, the sorts of things you might think, are you using the system? What are you using? Types of the options are you using, et cetera? What sorts of things would you like us to be working on with the system? So please, if you have a few minutes, it would be wonderful if you could take the time to come in and actually give us some feedback here. We appreciate your participation. Okay, so finally, it's my delight to introduce our guest speaker for today. Most of you probably know Keith Elliston. He's been very active in the foundation since the beginning. He's one of the founders of the original tranSMART Foundation in I don't know, things like 2013. He led the effort to form the I2B2 tranSMART Foundation, and led it for the first year, and then went off to work on started a new company called Axiomatics, which we've heard about here a number of times. And now, most recently, as part of his work, I think, with Axiomatics, Keith learned about another company called PHEMI Systems that was very interesting. And after working with them for a while, has now taken over as the CEO of PHEMI. And I will leave it to Keith to give us some more information about PHEMI.
Okay, thanks, Rudy. Well, thanks for the introduction, Rudy. That's fantastic. So one of the things I've been doing over the past couple of years is looking at ways that we could take advantage of all the health data we have in the world and use that for innovation. Part of what we're doing with Axiomatics is helping, a lot of groups use I2B2 and tranSMART that don't have the internal IT capabilities there, and scaling some of that key up. And through the course of that process, I ran into this company, PHEMI Systems, who was interested in actually integrating I2B2 with their platform as one of the key front ends to the data that they're ingesting. And what I discovered in PHEMI is really one of the first and only one that I've seen to date, big data platform, truly big data platform that is really geared directly towards the key challenges of health data science. And so what I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of what we're doing at PHEMI. As Rudy said, I started working with PHEMI about a year ago, and I assumed the role of CEO in November. So we're moving the company forward, not just as a big data for health data science, but really looking at how we can help health systems unlock the data that they have hidden in those health systems and how we can get it out there, utilize it, make it shareable, accessible, and monetizable for those health systems. So the key challenge here, as we know in health data science, is that we have lots of different kinds of data. People, typically working with a lot of tabular data in health systems coming from EHRs, but there's an awful lot of unstructured data, medical images, dictations, videos, documents, reports. We're seeing a growing amount of genetic data, both in terms of tumor profiles and genotypes, but also in full genome sequences. With the advent of Internet of Things, we're seeing a lot of data coming directly from patients' devices and various remote monitoring systems. And we've seen a big growth in the area of integrating artificial intelligence into the healthcare systems, particularly with learning healthcare systems. And so this sort of sets the groundwork for the challenge. One of the key things that I didn't realize going into this is how much healthcare data is produced every year. This is an estimate coming from Stanford, which suggests that we produced about 2,000 exabytes of health data in 2020. And the growth rate in producing these data, it grows about 47% per year. If we think about that in context, the whole data center storage capacity in the world today is about 985 exabytes. So we're producing huge amounts of health data. When we look at where the data is coming from, we know we have 165,000 hospitals worldwide. We have millions, if not hundreds of millions of patients today using remote monitoring systems, generating huge amounts of data. Last year, it's estimated there were 3.6 billion imaging studies conducted globally. And we know today we have over 500,000 human genome sequences today, and that's something that's doubling every 7 months. So we have a huge amount of data coming across the health system. The key challenge, and this is a challenge that we've addressed as a foundation and with I2B2 in many ways, is reuse of these data. And if we think about the fact that we have about 2,000 exabytes of data produced in 2020 in health systems globally, we know that less than a petabyte of that data is actually accessible and usable for secondary uses. And so that's really the scope of the challenge. So what's the key challenge in liberating a lot of these health data for use, particularly secondary uses? And the biggest issue is privacy laws. That is, how do we balance patient privacy and patient anonymity and data governance with data access and data use? And the key challenge we have is when we get out of tabular data, how do we anonymize data in a way that actually makes sense? The more data we have about an individual, the easier it is to re-identify them. And so how do we manage those anonymization challenges? The other key thing is that when we look at a lot of the business models that have come up lately around reusing health data, there's no incentive for the healthcare system to participate. In essence, all they do is get access to their own data as part of their incentive. So we need to find ways to help groups monetize and incentivize. And one thing I'll point out is Ernst & Young did a study last year that estimated that the value of the NHS data in the UK, the digital health data that they have, is somewhere around $15 billion per year if they were to monetize those data. So data monetization is really critical in this space. And then finally, the last key challenge is that there's no standard set of rules. The rules change depending on where you are. If we look across Europe, every country has its own privacy rules. We look in Canada, where FEMI is based, and every province has its own set of privacy laws. And so understanding how we can work with data, use data, et cetera, we've got to get to a different model. So the other key challenge that we think about when we think about health big data is the challenges that we see with big data in general. That's velocity, or in this case, privacy. And so what a lot of groups have done is move towards sharing lots of data, but anonymizing it on the way in and trying to manage the risks and data there. Or locking down data, putting data into secure data enclaves where nobody can access the data. And what we really need to find is a way to do responsible sharing, where we can share data responsibly. We can generate revenue streams back to health systems for them and to participate in the sharing. We can manage access to the data, and we can protect patient privacy and security of the data. And this is really where PHEMI is focused today. So what is the PHEMI solution? In essence, we started back in 2014 by developing what we call the PHEMI Trustworthy Data Lab. This is a big data platform, enterprise big data, scales to petabytes and beyond. Allows us to ingest data from anywhere, apply governance and anonymization rules to it, which I'll show you in some more detail, and leverages leading open source platforms to make this happen. And what we're doing now is integrating this platform into an offering in partnership with health data systems. So we're partnering with data systems to work with them in a data as a service model to ingest data into a dedicated PHEMI platform, to apply the governance rules, privacy rules, et cetera, that we need to in that particular context, and creating an opportunity for them to work and share those data with others and create a monetization stream to go back and support the health system. And this is a way that we can incentivize the sharing of data, incentivize health systems to work with the data. We can provide the capabilities to help them do this because many health systems don't have that infrastructure and knowledge. And then we can catalyze this collaborative environment to work with groups that want to access and utilize the data for secondary purposes. The third thing we're doing is what we call the Health Virtuosity Federated Data Marketplace. And that is, instead of taking data out of jurisdictions where we have the right governance and anonymizing it or dicing it up in ways that we can aggregate it, is we don't aggregate the data, we federate the data. And from that perspective, what we can do is link federated Momi instances together and enable people to find the data that they're interested in, work with those data, and leverage those data overall in a way that respects the privacy laws and respects the governance of the data. So let me get into a little bit more detail for you. The PHEMI Trustworthy Data Lab is, like I said, it's an enterprise big data platform based on state-of-the-art open source platforms. In particular, we've integrated Accumulo, which is developed by the NSA. It's a NoSQL scalable big data platform that allows us to precisely govern data down to individual cells. And in fact, it's a key value store, so we can have specific values of those data in those particular cells that are anonymized to different levels for different classification levels. We've also built this on Spark and Hadoop, and we have the ability to ingest, in essence, any type of data, structured, unstructured, high dimensional, et cetera, ingest it into and onboard it into a secure loading zone where we can apply the governance and anonymization rules. We can curate, add various metadata and whatnot to those data, apply our privacy and security policies, and then protect the data through full audit control and provenance of the data, and then share the data using what we call access-based access controls, share the data specifically with people for specific uses. And the beauty of the way the platform works is when you're accessing data, you have access to see all of the data that you have the rights to see, the classification to see, none of the data that you don't have any rights to see, and you only see it at the level of classification that's appropriate to your clearance. And so the beauty of the platform is we can ingest, we can organize and protect, and we can deliver these data to specific end users. One of the keys to this is how do we manage private data? So instead of trying to anonymize and leave the identities behind, we bring in all the PHI into the platform. That becomes our single source of truth. And then from this, we can identify various elements of those data that are protected health information. And we can block access to those on a specific way. In addition, we can implement anonymization of these data. So we can anonymize those data so we can deliver views of those data to specific end users based upon their level of classification and their need for access to those data. And because we've implemented privacy by design, we can assess the risk of re-identification as we deliver these data, to any specific end user. So to give you a sense of how that works, we can, by keeping the PHI within the system, we can generate a resolution of those data appropriate to the specific end user. Here's an example using birth dates. So for example, we can have the full birth date. We can mask it to year for a researcher. Maybe for a data scientist, we put in an age range. For an administrator who doesn't need to see anything there, we can tokenize it to preserve it. And anybody who's not authorized to see those data sees nothing at all. And so we can manage the level of anonymization appropriate to this particular use case and the intended use of those data. In addition, we can control who has access to the data, in a very specific way using attribute-based access controls. And what this is a means of identifying who has the right to see the data based upon key attributes, who they are, who they work for, when they're accessing the data, where they're accessing it from, etc. And so all of these key attributes in terms of departments, job titles, roles, classification levels, etc., can be used to generate access authorizations to the data. Within that context, it's important. I may be able to, as a physician, access my patient's data, with the full identification of it when I'm in the hospital. But if I'm accessing those data from the research laboratory, I have a different level of access, and I can no longer see some of that private data. If I'm working for a particular company that is collaborating on a particular data set, I can see only those data that I'm authorized to see through my governance, and only at that level of anonymization that's agreed in our data sharing agreements. So this enables us to very finely address on a cell-by-cell basis what data and what level of anonymization is presented to an individual, a user of the system. Another key thing that we've done with the platform is use AI to help manage the anonymization and identification of PHI within the systems. So when we're working with tabular data, PHI is pretty easy to detect. When we're looking at reports, we're looking at imaging data, et cetera, it becomes more of a challenge to identify that information. So we've developed AI that can go through and identify patient protected health information in unstructured data, in complex data, et cetera, so we can specifically mask those data and anonymize those going forward. The other thing that we've integrated into the platform is the means to generate on a particular data set by data set basis, data-driven synthetic data. So we can generate synthetic data that matches the attributes and characteristics of the data from a particular patient population and provide that without having to anonymize or anything else there, because it's simulated data, to a specific end user that they can use to develop their methods, identify key characteristics, develop a machine learning method. And then when that method is developed, we can come back and apply that to the real data and move that forward. So these are some key things that we're developing in the platform. So the key enabling technology here for what we're doing is this FEMI Trustworthy Data Lab. And what it enables us to do is share data effectively and completely without compromising privacy. And again, given this is a state-of-the-art big data platform, on the platform without the data ever leaving, we can implement a secure enclave where we can do analytics, we can do machine learning, we can do all the key things that we need to do on those data without the data ever needing to leave the environment. The second key thing is the ability to implement and comply with local governance rules. Those governance rules may be based upon the institution that we're working with, as well as the local jurisdictional privacy laws. And we can implement these on a custom basis to ensure that the local governance and privacy rules are followed, they're auditable, and we have the full provenance as we go through and anonymize data. And then finally, because this platform runs on-premise, we run in the cloud, we can certainly future-proof and scale these platforms very readily. We're currently working with Microsoft to do a scaling experiment to see how the platform scales into the tens and even hundreds of petabytes. So from that perspective, we have a way of scaling from on-premise, moving directly to cloud, all within the same platform. The second key thing we're doing is working in this data as a service model with healthcare systems. And so we're currently partnered with Providence Healthcare and a number of other health systems in British Columbia, producing what we're calling the Multiomics and Molecular Imaging Data Lab. This is a single instance of the FEMI Data Lab working in partnership with the health systems where we provide them the ability to ingest the data, to govern the data, to anonymize the data, to deliver the data, to work with the data with particular end users and customers. So the concept here is, instead of a health system, needing to put their own platform together, we can work with them and provide the services and capabilities to generate the platform, get the data ready so it's analysis ready, and then actually work to support people collaborating on those data. How that works is the FEMI Trustworthy Data Lab is the core of this. We architect that specifically to the governance rules of the institutions and working with the privacy laws of the jurisdiction. We work to ingest the data from providers. We can have many different providers in the same data lab. For example, in the British Columbia one, we have 4 different health systems throughout British Columbia collaborating on data ingest. As we ingest data, we're not just getting the clinical data, we're getting omics data, accessing imaging data, unstructured reports, etc. And then we work with third-party partners. For example, we have a partnership with a company that can go in and identify any PHI burned into medical images and then mask that and anonymize the images directly. So it's a very specific third-party technology that is integrated into the Momi Data Lab and is available to anonymize those images for secondary use. And then we provide a series of what we call front counters to the community, where private sector groups, life sciences companies, biotech companies, pharmaceutical companies, public sector groups, universities and research institutes can access and utilize this data through these front counters, working within the Momi Data Lab to analyze genomic data, medical imaging data, clinical EHR data. And then finally, another key piece of this is the ability to stage data for participation in federations. And so we're currently working with ITV2 and with Shrine to push data into a representation there that can be federated across instances for that particular application. We're also working with federated machine learning technology so that we can do model building across Momi instances without ever having the data leave that instance. And we're working on federated analytics as well. So we can do analysis of specific types of data across Momi instances through a fully federated analytics capability. The kinds of services that we add in the context of the Momi Data Lab is really something that makes this a full standalone capability. And in the case of the British Columbia Momi Data Lab, we're actually forming this as a benefits corp, a B Corp, in which we are stakeholders with the key health systems as well. So we can provide consulting services, data services for ETL, data analytics, working with model building, collaborating with pharma and AI companies, full-time data integration, et cetera. So this is a full data as a service capability with specific health system data loaded into it. The kinds of use cases for the Momi Data Lab, Merck, for example, is working on a project in lung imaging AI, where they want to look at specific images from specific sets of patients, build some AI, in particular looking at surveillance for post-pneumococcal vaccine administration. Roche is actually working on a project in retinal images for macular degeneration using imaging of the retina. We're working with Light AI, which has got a consumer-driven iPhone photographic means of diagnosing COVID infection, as well as strep infections and more, directly from an assisted image taken by the end user. And then we're working with 1Qubit, who is a quantum computing company, working on how they can access data and aggregate data to help generate new AI products that they're working on overall. So the final piece of what we're doing is implementing this federated marketplace. As we implement these Momi Data Labs in different jurisdictions, the challenge is to move away from what I call the blockbuster model of health data aggregation, where you've got a group that basically aggregates data from a number of health systems, anonymizes it in bulk, and then ships it out for people to integrate into their own data lakes. And the challenge there is you lose a lot of information. As we get into more complex data, the challenge of re-identification becomes paramount. And so the way we see working with that is moving to much more of the Netflix type model. is you can find the data where it lives, you can work with the data where it lives, and you bring the results back centrally. So the data never touches your internal data lake, and in fact stays within the jurisdiction in which it was generated, where we can manage the access and privacy overall. The other thing that this enables is the development of an incentive base for health systems to share and work with those data, because they can generate a revenue stream by sharing and working with these data, and can do it not just within a jurisdiction, but across jurisdictions. We think this creates a real incentive for that data sharing. I'm a host, so I'm going to admit Jeffrey Klan. So just my last slide is the team advisor. So I'm the CEO of the company since November. Tom Skarnecchia, who's a world expert in data governance and was the lead architect on the OMOP CDM, is our chief data officer. Scott Morrison, our CTO, is a very experienced big data analytics guy. Rudy's working with us as chief strategy officer. Alan Rabinowitz is our chief medical officer coming out of the St. Paul system. And David Pay, who is a startup CFO, is our chief financial officer. We have a growing list of key advisors that we're adding to the team, but our key focus here is on leveraging a true big data platform to liberate data from health systems and to enable the sharing and reuse of those data on a global basis. So that's FEMI. Thank you. Happy to take questions, Rudy.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, that's super. So let's open up the questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can unmute and ask, or put it in the chat window.
This sounds like an awesome company that I didn't know, how it's been hidden in plain sight for so long. But one thing I did wonder is a petabyte is still quite a lot of data. And from my experience, healthcare data is really bad and not very useful unless you do some clever data cleaning. So I wondered if FEMI is addressing data quality, or if you have any comments on what is in that data that you're trying to move in the realm from 1 petabyte to hundreds of exabytes. And
yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question, Jeff. And just one thing on FEMI, I think, FEMI was developed in Vancouver and has been working across Canada in Canadian health systems. I discovered them through a partnership with a Canadian company that Axiomatics was doing, and was kind of blown away by the technology. And I said, well, what are you guys doing to connect to life sciences? And they said, what's life sciences? They'd come up from the big data side and had penetrated in the health space. They'd done some work in financial services and insurance. But what we've done is really focus on the healthcare applications, because that's what we think is really key here. In terms of the big data challenges with health data, one of the key things is getting the health systems themselves involved in data curation. That's really critical. We're doing a lot of integration of AI methods around data curation to do that as well. And then the key is finding which data are going to be really important in staging those data. One of the key elements of the FEMI platform is it's a really advanced metadata analytics platform. And so as we ingest data, we build a metadata profile. As we work through and create analysis ready data, it's really all about how you generate specific metadata to make the data more useful and more analyzable. So we're not working usually with the raw data, we're working with transformed metadata. And that transformation is aided by AI. We're working with third parties on some of that with specific AI capabilities and technologies. And then we're engaging the health systems themselves in the data curation process. So I don't expect us to deal with exabytes to start, but I think getting to petabytes quickly. To give you an example, in British Columbia alone, we have a collection of about 4 million medical imaging studies that will be part of Momi, which represents about 1.3 petabytes of imaging data. And that'll be a key part of the Momi platform in British Columbia.
Cool, thanks.
Yep.
I see Joe Wick, you're unmuted. Would you like to ask a question? Maybe not.
Now, one of the things I think it's very interesting about the FEMI Trustworthy Data Lab is we can implement this as as a big data enclave, pretty readily, so that we ingest data in, we lock it down, and you have full capabilities to do all the analytics, The platform integrates with, all the key big data analytics platforms through APIs and connectors. We can scale the platform with GPU farms and do very scalable AI and model building, all without the data ever leaving the platform. And that's really the key to this, is that if you're going to work with data in a secure, privacy implemented environment, as you want to bring the data in and have full capabilities of working with the data without ever having the data have to leave.
Any other questions for Keith? Just feel free to unmute. Go ahead.
Hi, Keith. This is Diane. This is actually really exciting. I'm glad you came to the meeting to talk about this. So, do you think that this would be something that like an individual hospital with an individual I2B2 would use, or is this really more data with multiple data from multiple sources in one place?
Yeah, I think, we certainly could work with an individual hospital, but it's kind of overkill. I'll give you an example of one group we're working with currently. Is we're working with the Provincial Health Service, the diagnostic laboratory function of the Provincial Health Service in British Columbia. And what we use FEMI to do is we collect up all of the laboratory diagnostics data across the province, 200 different laboratories across the province, ingest that, harmonize it, link it into a single table, which is one of the challenges of working in an SQL environment. Is it's really hard to do joins. Working in a no SQL environment, we can readily join the data. It's a very wide table, harmonize it, generate key metadata, and we push that out to a daily dashboard, which presents all of the testing data done overnight across the province. One of the key dashboards they're doing is the COVID dashboard, but we do that for a lot of data. Another thing we're doing in the context of British Columbia is we're building a data set, which is the last 10 years of every diagnostic test run in every diagnostic laboratory in the province. So this is about 13 billion records overall over the last 10 years. And, again, the key here is to build a single table in which we can work with this. And because the way FEMI works as a big data system is we load the data all into memory across a cluster. And we can do queries in 20 or 30 seconds that if you were to try and do in a regular database environment would take you, days to do. And so it enables this iteration with very large data sets. And I think that's really where the benefit is when you have very large data sets. Smaller data sets, you probably can solve those with relational systems and traditional data lakes, but this is really good for really big data.
Seems like this would have synergy with the initiative that we're starting to get involved with the Dell Foundation around the Enclave. I know Sean is on. I don't know if he's.
Well, FEMI is a great platform for implementing a big data enclave. You can you ingest your data, you secure it, and you can do all of your your transformations, your analytics, everything. And depending on how secure you want your enclave, you can do that all by thin client and never have any direct connection to the system itself, but yet still have the ability to go all the way through your AI model building, full analytics, etc.
Didn't you say at the end of your talk that now you're moving more toward distributing answers rather than moving data to a central location? Or did I misunderstand that?
No, you got that exactly right. So our goal is to build a network of Momi instances where you can work within a what I call sort of a data jurisdiction or a privacy jurisdiction. The challenge we have in Canada is, every province has its own privacy jurisdiction. So I cannot move any non-anonymized data from British Columbia to Ontario. And so if I want to look at data both in Ontario and British Columbia, I have to raise this to a very high level of anonymization, which is really challenging, especially when you start looking with really complex high dimensional data. Or I've got to find another solution. So for us, one of the platforms we've integrated on the open source side is PySift. And so we can use PySift and we can stage, a data frame in British Columbia and in Ontario, run the machine learning algorithms on the data, and then centrally pull back the results of the machine learning. Another thing that we're focusing on is trustworthy AI. So one of the challenges in building models with higher levels of complex data is that your models can often re-identify patients, even though you're building them with anonymized data. And so having the private health data in the system where you're building the models allows us to test the trustworthiness of a model when you've built it to see whether or not it's re-identifying patients.
Cool. So it's doing a little bit of I2B2 Enshrine stuff, like supporting both sides of things, but with more analytics.
Well, and one of the things we've done as well in terms of I2B2 Enshrine is again, we can take the system and we can build a data representation of the I2B2 database and connect I2B2 to it. So you have I2B2 working on it. And you can also, do the same thing for Shrine and have Shrine actually running across instances if you wanted to actually use I2B2 and Shrine.
So your platform runs on top of, can run on top of the I2B2 platform?
No, you can run I2B2 on top of it. So
that's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've done that, which is one of the first ways I actually got involved.
Very interesting.
Yeah, we've been working on a project with an 80 hospital commercial hospital system in Asia that is using the combination of PHEMI and I2B2 for a data monetization play. And their goal there is to actually have pharma companies come in, look at their data in an I2B2 Shrine interface, select a cohort of patients, and then export them a series of data. We can do that in a much more direct way, actually going back to the PHEMI platform, but that's the way they wanted to proceed with that one.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Keith directly?
Yeah, happy to talk about people offline. I'm really excited about this, obviously. Just getting things rolling in terms of what we're doing with the Momi Data Labs and with the Federated Marketplace. But I'd love to, have any kind of conversations you guys would like to have. It'd be fantastic.
Super. Thanks so much, Keith.
Yep. Thank you.
Any questions about anything else that we talked about today or anything? And Diane has now joined us, as you heard. So if not, Diane, would you like to say a few words? We close.
Sorry, I was late. Thank you, Rudy, for pitching for the beginning of the meeting. I think Rudy probably mentioned that we're going to focus our next meeting on 4C and kind of an overview of everything that's happening within 4C, which I think is really exciting. So please, join that meeting and invite your friends. And really focusing on the June meeting. And Keith, we'd love to have you come to the June meeting and talk about this. I think this is something that the community would really be excited about. It's necessary and pretty unique. So
you might be able to twist my arm, Diane.
And I think the Europeans, because of all of their privacy issues, I think they would we have a monthly meeting there. I'd love to be able to ping you to come to one of those meetings and start to.
Yeah, we're actually talking to a couple of commercial groups in Europe. We haven't rolled out what we're doing with the Momi Data Lab, but I think Europe is actually a perfect environment for what we're doing.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I everyone a happy February, and I hope you all are staying warm.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Thanks everyone. This will be recording will be posted with the slide decks within a day or so. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.